Hello and welcome to Live with Lighthouse. Back with a great episode this week and really excited to have everyone here who tuned in today. Welcome back to Live with Lighthouse. This is the show where we show you the technology and talent solutions to drive your business forward. I'm your host, Joe Ray, and really excited this week that we have a really current events focused announcement for business in New York State. We're talking about the new pay transparency law that went into effect this week, what that requires of local employers, how that's going to change certain conversations about pay with jobs internally and externally. And I'm really excited to have two great experts on this issue joining the show today. Very excited to welcome for the first time on Live with Lighthouse, Emily Martin from Ally HR Partners, and we'll bring her up right here. There's Emily.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate that you can join us this morning. And returning to the show this week, we have from Lighthouse Technology Services, our own Claire Stroh is joining as well. Hi, Claire.
Hi, Joe. Hi, Emily.
Hey, Claire.
Welcome. Thank you both for taking the time today, and thanks to everyone who's tuning in live on LinkedIn. Emily, why don't you give us a real quick intro to you and what you do and who you serve with Ally HR Partners?
Yeah. So Ally HR Partners is basically I would call it, I guess, a boutique HR consulting firm. And what we help our clients do is we say solve their people problems and maximize their people potential. So that's all things HR related. So the HR problems are things like compliance and employee relations issues and, investigations and things like that. And then, I'm a strong believer, and it's undersold, that there's a lot of value to be gained from an HR expert's perspective on things. So we also help really align your people operations with your business and help you use people better and not have them just be problems.
Yeah. There's a lot that goes into that. And it's always good to have partners in your corner that can support that. So love it. And Claire, I know you've been on Live with Lighthouse before. You've stepped into the host seat and done an episode as well to cover for me once. So maybe just a quick reintroduction for those who haven't gotten to know you yet.
Yes, quick reintro. I'm Claire. I work at Lighthouse Technology Services. I specialize in talent attraction, talent acquisition, and talent retention. I'm here at Lighthouse. I'm helping our internal team and our clients with those items as well, and all the technology tools and process that goes into making that happen.
Incredible. And talking about tools and processes, obviously there's going to be, with this new pay transparency law, just different processes for hiring teams across New York State and here in Buffalo, New York as well. So really looking forward to learning a bit and how some of those tools can support businesses as well. Maybe we just start with a really high level overview as people are coming in here, just kind of as a basic overview for companies who are 4 or more employees. Every public job posting, every promotion and whatnot has to have a salary range disclosed. So Emily, maybe if you could just jump in and kick us off a little bit here, just into the particulars of the new rules.
Yeah, sure. So high level, this went into effect, I think the official date was Sunday. So this week. So yeah, if you're an employer in New York State and you're hiring and you have 4 or more employees, which I imagine is most people, you now are required by law to include, like you said, a salary range or a pay rate range for what you, in good faith and your best estimation, would possibly hire for that position that you're hiring for. So that includes any position you post externally, those ranges need to be on those postings. And if you post it internally, it also needs to be on your internal postings. And it's for any jobs that you're hiring that would physically work in New York State or report to a supervisor or a manager that physically works or resides in New York State. So that's pretty much all jobs probably for your business if you do business in New York or are hiring from New York. So yeah, it's certainly there's a lot of questions that go around it, which I'm sure we'll talk about today, but definitely a fun new requirement that's already causing problems for a lot of employers.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. And just to clarify too, so this is that 4 employee limit or higher. Is it all businesses in all industries?
Yes, correct. Yeah. And it's really employees on your payroll. So, we could do a whole podcast on the difference between contractors and 1099s and employees, but this is if you have employees on payroll, W-2 people.
Perfect. Good. And looking at the particulars too. So when we're thinking about adding a salary range to a public job posting, like what does that really require businesses to do? Like, where's the most effective way to list that and make sure that people who are seeking jobs can find that information?
Yeah, in some ways this isn't new, because if you're posting on Indeed, right, which is I think probably one of the most ubiquitous places that employers post jobs, they ask you and basically require that at this point anyway, for the most part. But certainly they need to be accurate now, what you put on there. But remember, if you're posting on LinkedIn, I guess if you're posting on Craigslist, it's any job advertisement, which is anything you're, putting out there in the world. So I would just hardwire the range right into the actual language of your job posting. The other thing to note that we didn't mention yet is if you do have a job description, you are required to post that as well. I hate posting job descriptions, and I hate that New York State is now encouraging that. I think you could be much more creative in creating an ad and, marketing your business. I think there's a way to comply with that part and still do that. But I would just hardwire, right in your language that you put together what the pay range is for the job. And it's only base comp, Joe. So no, you don't have to include bonus or benefit or total comp stuff in there. It's just really the base pay rate, cash comp. Yeah.
Perfect. Just that high level, like people are getting an idea of where a certain job falls, and then they can apply to roles that are aligning with what they're looking for.
Right. Yep.
Gotcha.
Yep. Yeah.
Claire, maybe you can jump in a little bit here real quick too, because I did want to elaborate on something too. And I know you and I have talked about this before. What's the difference between a job posting and a job description? That there may be some people out there who don't know that.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think Emily would be more of an expert as well. I was actually going to ask you, Emily, because I think at Lighthouse, we have a really good combination of both of those things. So we do have requirements as well as like what you'd be doing and maybe more of that language instead of like tasks and responsibilities. We do like to call it like what you'd be doing, like position overview. So it does have that like speak to your audience kind of marketing type piece, but we still obviously want to have those requirements and things in there. But yeah, we basically, include like those, years of experience. If there's a hard education requirement, if there's not, we just leave it off. We don't even put preferred anymore. So we're just trying to remove those items to remove bias and things like that. But it's still a good idea to put in your posting any of those requirements. And again, Emily, correct me if I'm wrong, still should be in your posting if there are things like lifting requirements or other like physical restrictions or things for the job. Since we do high level tech and most roles are remote, we don't have some of those items, but if they're required, in your job description or things that people need to be able to do, they should be in your posting as well. So would love for you to expand on that, Emily, whatever your expertise would be for that.
No, that's totally true. And I like your answer because it like is an honest answer, I think, of any like recruiter or any employer who, like, listen, if you're not like a complete HR expert in all things compliance, like you're not going to, be creating a job posting from that perspective, which I think is good, because if you're doing it too far from the other way, it's going to be a very boring and unappealing job posting, right? Which is also why I hate posting when people just copy and paste the job description, because it's basically just a list of every possible task item that someone could be doing, right? Where I think you can, like you said, Claire, like give a really good idea of what the job is responsible for. And I like to say like accountable for, what are the accountabilities of the role? Those should be listed in there to give people a realistic job preview. But yes, and from a compliance standpoint, especially like if there's hard and fast requirements, whether they're physical or like educational or experience wise, like those should be in there as well, because if you're saying no to certain candidates because they don't have the things you need, that's not going to be very defendable if you've not, communicated that and really made decisions based on those black and white lines that, you need to cross to have the job. But you're right, Claire. I think now, like most people are trying to remove barriers, whether it's for, equity reasons or just like, candidate flow reasons in a tight labor market still. I think people are setting less hard and fast rules about degrees and things like that now and keeping it pretty open. So.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you both. I think that's some good clarifications there. The other thing I always love mentioning too, when we talk about job postings, and we'll get into this a little bit more talking about some employer branding concepts, but a job posting is also a place too where not just are you getting those job description, like the ad hoc tasks, and now the salary information and the range and whatnot as well. But it's also a place for employers to list their values, what makes them as a company unique, why people should choose to work for them too. So that kind of stuff always makes job postings more attractive to, the right candidates that businesses are looking for. But now that they're going to be required to include that salary information as well, that's typically one of, if not the very first thing most everyone looking at a job posting is going to be looking for. So just kind of enhances the breadth of information when you're talking about attracting potential candidates.
Yeah, you got to sell yourself, sell your company. I mean, the labor market's changing for sure. But especially in the last 3 years, how are you differentiating your ad amongst the millions out there, right? So yeah, core value stuff, history stuff, culture stuff, why working for you is better than working for someone else. Obviously, pay is a big thing for a lot of people as a part of that. So now you'll be mandated to include that. Hopefully you're not on the weaker end of that in the market, because this law might impact you negatively in your ability to recruit. But
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Let's dive into, if businesses haven't been putting together salary ranges for their job postings previously, what are some best practices maybe? And Emily, if you want to start with this, like what are some best practices on how wide of a salary range should you put? What's kind of, as you were saying earlier, a good faith salary range?
yeah, I mean, I guess first of all, I would ask Claire, because Claire, you're going to know this. You have more experience with this than I do, probably. But like, how many of your clients that are looking to recruit like actually have a finite salary range in mind when you contact them?
That's a really good question. I would say it's about half, which I think is
Okay.
pretty good. But yeah, we try to do for, because we do consultant kind of positions, our postings always have an hourly range. We try to keep the spread to like 20 at most. We try to do 10 to 15. But sometimes, yes, if it's unclear from the client, or they say they're flexible, or it is a like really niche role or whatever, we may widen the range to 20.
Yeah.
So like 70 an hour to 90 an hour, for example. But otherwise we just try to look at, have we filled the role before? What feedback have we heard from candidates? And we just try to advise them on what's competitive.
Yeah. All right. I was expecting less than 50%, but still 50% isn't a huge number. And I guess I say that for everybody listening or watching, that, it's like, oh my God, we don't have pay ranges set for any of our roles in our organization. Like, we're so inadequate, because the truth is very few organizations do, for lots of reasons. The pay ranges have been changing so much with minimum wages and things, so they would just have to change every year anyway. So that's probably one of them. But yeah, hardly anyone has these things defined now and upfront. Potentially, this law is going to create a situation where everybody now needs to go out and do comp surveying and establish these. But yeah, when it comes to the breadth of the range, I mean, honestly, I would like give people some comfort and empower them by saying, like, do what you're comfortable with, right? And this, it's seemingly, and there's some clarification still, I think, needed with the law a bit, but it's not what you potentially ever could pay for this position in your organization over time as people gain experience and get merit increases or whatever. It's for that specific opening at that specific time, knowing what level of experience you need this person to have, how much could you or would you pay for this specific seat that's open in your business right now. And I think most people probably have some upper limit to their budget there. But yeah, I guess I'm not comfortable giving like a specific like percentage range. It's just realistic, what's realistic to you. And, I've seen a lot out there in the press initially when these laws have been passed, like in New York City earlier than here, and things where the ranges were pretty wide, and people, were accusing these companies of kind of, making a joke of the law by doing that. But I think, in reality, that could be the actual range, right? Depending on if they get an all-star candidate, maybe they're willing to pay that much more, but maybe they're also filling a couple entry-level positions of the same nature at the time, so they have to keep the bottom lower. So, just do what's in good faith and make sure you hire within it. And I think, you'll be good to go.
Mm-hmm. Thank you both so much. And knowing for everyone watching too, that there's going to be lots of questions that come up as well. So that whether you're watching this live on LinkedIn right now, or if you're watching the recording on YouTube, feel free to drop some comments below, and we'll be glad to help out as well. This is, definitely a learning experience for everyone, and glad to share the expertise of our team here. So thank you everyone who's tuning in today. As far as, the ranges, now that we've talked about that, how do you go about setting an effective range, and what might be some of the conversations that take place to say, hey, if I need to post a salary range for this job, this is what the salaries might be, and how do you find some of that nuance of, how big of a range you might make?
Yeah. Well, I think so. If you're really, stumped about numbers, and and this is for job seekers too, right? Like, what should you be expecting in the job market? I think now there's going to be more data than ever available, right? Because everybody's going to be, putting this out there. So you certainly could consult with, someone like Claire, if you're using an agency, or if you're using or getting help in recruiting. They're obviously going to have a lot of data on this. But also now you could just go on Indeed, right? Like if you're an employer and you're posting a job, and you could easily just type in the job title for your area and see what similar jobs are posted at range wise to get an idea of a starting point at least. There's also a lot of free comp data out there, like from different staffing firms, that make these guides available from year to year based on their own like sourcing and benchmarking that they've done. So if you just Google that, I think Randstad is one, and Akara Solutions is another, that they publish this free information. I mean, you're going to have to enter your information, and they're definitely going to follow up with you about doing business with them. But, the information is relatively free. So, yeah, there is quite a few more resources out there than people think that can help provide some benchmarks.
Yeah. And another great avenue, too, and I'll drop the link in the comments, is local chambers of commerce as well. So Buffalo Niagara Partnership is a great advocate for our local region here in Buffalo as well. They have a portal called Size Up WNY for their members to research salary data as well. State Department of Labor is going to have a lot of that information. Then I'm going to give a shout out as well to our friends at Tech Buffalo, who've done a great job specifically for the tech industry in town of aggregating some data as well. So there's always different sources to do their research. And like you said too there, Emily, probably good to, research a breadth of options as well, and really, make sure that you have a good faith range that you're starting from, but then also, as Claire was saying earlier too, take into account what feedback comes from candidates, and what the talent market is expecting for salaries as well.
I wanted to ask Emily real quick too, without straying too far from our topic, kind of the internal equity piece, like what you're seeing with your clients on that, because sometimes when we get a range from somebody, we do kind of ask about that a little bit, like how was this determined? Do you have other people in the department? Because we ask about the team like structure and stuff, and sometimes it'll come up that, this person might need a raise to come up to what we're going to be posting.
Yeah.
And so I would just love a quick overview on kind of like what your experience has been seeing that so far.
Yeah, no, I think besides like outlining the requirements of this law, this is probably the number one question any viewers have, and it's probably the only question I've gotten from my own clients in this week or in the weeks leading up to this, which is, first of all, do we really have to do this and post this internally? So first of all, like the law does not require you to post anything externally or internally. So like if you weren't posting internally before, this doesn't say that you have to do it now. It's just saying if you do, you have to put the pay ranges on there. But, a lot of clients, mostly because of the wage compression issues going on, because of the labor market pressures and COVID, but also minimum wages, both from an exempt and non-exempt standpoint going up year after year, like they're weary about posting these ranges on the jobs, because people internally who may not necessarily be making less than what they're willing to pay a new person, but close to it because of the wage compression, it is resulting in real world time, because I've seen it with my clients, internal employees, I don't know why they're going online and looking at this stuff, but they're seeing, even with these external postings, what the ranges are and saying, why am I making so close to the bottom of that? Or, why am I not making more towards the top of that if that's what you're willing to pay? And it just creates all this internal like turmoil. And, I would say in most cases, at least in my experience, employers are not trying to do the wrong thing. Like they're acting in good faith, they're treating their employees well. But employees don't always understand the nuance behind that, right? Like, listen, we're looking for someone with more experience to come in off the street, and that's what the market demands we pay that person right now. Or this is just a range of potential pay. It doesn't mean we're going to pay towards the higher ends, but it creates all this like explanation and kind of coming from a place behind. And, the argument to that, I think, would be to just make all of your pay practices transparent from the beginning and post your pay ranges internally and show people like how they can make more, either through year after year merit or performance increases or being promoted to like senior levels of positions or different, grades of positions. So these are all things that employers are probably going to have to get creative on to combat some of the potential collateral damage of this law, which there always is collateral damage of these laws that aren't considered beforehand.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a process. It's definitely going to be a lot of figuring it out for a lot of employers too, not just the external side and public job postings, but like you said too, those internal conversations. Do either of you have any recommendations, where employers might start if they don't have that, necessarily an internal pay scale right now, or if that pay scale is shifting because of, like you said, some of those external labor market concerns? Where should businesses really start if they're looking to set up that pay range?
I would say look at those free resources, like, Claire was mentioning, and you were mentioning, Joe, like either locally or what's out there, and start to at least maybe put together some sort of skeleton infrastructure of what those increases are. And then, now's a good time to do that anyway, because or what those ranges are, because those are going to have to probably change, or at least strategically as a business over time. You're going to have to start planning for those with the minimum wage increases coming in 2024. Which, the hourly in this part of the state is going from $14.20 to $15, which is, nothing to sleep on. That's 80 cents an hour.
Yeah.
So what happens with your jobs or people now that are close to that 15? And are you going to give incremental percentage increases? But also the salary minimum is going up quite a bit this year, and will continue year after year for the next few years in New York State, at least too. So at least get ahead of start planning for that and how you are going to deal with the wage compression issue as well.
Yeah. Thanks everyone who's tuning in too. Allison Camp, shout out from our Lighthouse team right here. I think this new law will be very helpful for candidates and companies to find a good fit right from the start. Might take a little to get everything going, but overall excited to see what happens. And that's exactly what we were talking about too, right? It's going to be a process, people having to find the right, pay ranges that they're looking for. But overall, there's going to be a lot of, helpful benefits in the long term too, which actually might be a good pivot point to where I was thinking too of, externally and in terms of attracting the right people for your business. How might effective salary range listings in the long term help businesses attract more of, the right talent that they're looking for?
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what this does overall, right? Because if you're a candidate and you're job searching and you see the ranges, we'll say 50 to 75,000, right? When you're listing what you want to make, you're probably going to list that you want closer to the 75, range, right? If that's what the company is willing to pay. So in theory, this could drive up wages even more. We'll see how it can help recruiting. At least it's transparent from the beginning. So hopefully people aren't applying for a job that are expecting more than what the range is potentially listing. But I don't know about you, Claire, but I definitely see where people don't read job postings regardless of what's in them. And it includes the pay range part. So a lot of times I would say, like you probably see, Claire, one of my first questions for candidates always in a phone screen is, of course, legally now, just so everybody knows, you can't ask what people are making right now or in their past job. You can't do that anymore. But you can ask what the expectation is, and you still get people completely misaligned, even though it's in the job posting for what they want to make. So have you seen that, Claire? Yeah.
Yes, that definitely still happens. So you're right. We still ask, what are your salary expectations on every screen? And sometimes it feels like people have been programmed to do this over the years, which makes sense, but they initially respond right away with, well, what is this role paying? So now we can say, well, if you reviewed our job posting, the range is this to this. Again, like based on experience and things like that, where do you fall? What are you looking to make? So it's actually nice, I found from a recruiter standpoint, to have it there. It's so much easier to not have to go back and forth and kind of tiptoe around that question. And then it's really nice too for when people do that and they say their expectations are 75, if that's the end of the range, to be able to say, as you saw in the posting, requires whatever 5 years of experience in these technologies or this certification, based on like our conversation and where you fall meeting those requirements. Like, this is what I'm comfortable submitting you at. And most folks are pretty good about that. Again, I think you mentioned like you have to have that explanation or rationale for it. And if you're transparent with it, then people are like, okay, that makes sense. I recognize I'm missing this one thing that's on the posting. So, I'm okay with where you're, whatever you're recommending to submit me at. And sometimes we just have to have that conversation. And we just kind of work with them to figure out what's best. But it does help to just have it in there from the start. So I agree with Allison too. It'll be better, hopefully, for people to pick the roles they want to apply to because they know they're within that range. But it's definitely happened where we do ask that and it's way above and we just have to reshare what was on the posting. And sometimes they're willing to come down and other times you're right, they just didn't read it. So we're like, we'll keep you in touch for something or we'll keep in touch for something that's a better match.
Yeah, I wonder if people didn't believe that those ranges listed up to this point were real because, I think Indeed will like go ahead and estimate a salary if you don't put one in, which now you have to. So maybe now that they know it's like real data from the employer that they will actually read it and take it to heart. But yeah, that's funny. But I think that's a good point too, Claire, that you mentioned. And I was thinking that like, I almost think it could be worth in the posting when you mention the pay range, making a statement after that in a sentence that says, where, candidates fall within this range in terms of job offers will be, commiserate with level of experience, right? Just to like state that flat out. I mean, will everybody read that? No, but at least it's there and it's written there and it maybe quells your internal employees, concerns if they were to read that posting as well to understand that if they're also a newer employee in the business, that's also why they aren't at that, higher end of that pay range yet either. But I think getting creative with some of those statements afterwards could help kind of like, CYA in those situations. Yeah. But it's always going to fall on the recruiter. I'll say, Claire, like there's there's a ton of value to having someone internally in your organization or externally helping you with recruiting. Cause like that messaging and that, way that these things are handled up front definitely set the tone for someone's initial first impression and employment experience with the business, which is obviously really important. So.
Yeah. Thank you all. And actually there was one thing that came up in there that I wanted to bring back to Claire as well. Just with the recruiting experience working in tech has obviously been an industry where there's been a lot of upheaval between, throughout the last 3 to 5 years or so, where salaries were really rapidly increasing. But then it's also an industry where lots of layoffs have been happening and kind of like a big reorganization of a lot of that too. So knowing at Lighthouse that we've been including these salaries for a couple months now in every job posting and working with clients to make that happen. How has that kind of changed some of those conversations and are you able to kind of like build better relationships off the bat because you have that salary in the job description and just kind of setting that expectation from the start?
Yeah, no, so glad you brought that up, Joe. Yeah, I think we've been doing it since the spring. I think since New York City hit, honestly, because since we do fill a lot of roles remotely, we basically implemented it to anybody who could be working remotely out of an area that has pay transparency laws already. We should put it on there. So if we're hiring a fully remote role and someone from New York City or Denver could hold this role, then we were just like, we should include it for everything because eventually every place else will catch up, which they're now doing and putting in place. So you're right, Joe, it has really helped those conversations because sometimes it goes to one end of the spectrum where the person was expecting less or they're more flexible because they've been laid off or something. And we're able to say like, this is what our client's paying. This is where we feel you're a good fit. And it's higher than what they're hoping for. And that's great. And then obviously we have the other end of it sometimes too, where, we do have to say like, unfortunately, this is just where it's at right now. We do try to explain the factors if we can for how that range was determined. And, people can decide from there, again, to Allison's point in the comment, do they want to be flexible and want to be considered for this? Or again, should we just keep in touch for something that is in their range? So it definitely does help and build that rapport, like you were mentioning. So we try to be very honest, kind of right off the bat. And we do usually end up coming back around with our candidates and presenting something else that we think would interest them. And so I think they are more likely to keep in touch with us because we're just honest about that right off the bat.
Yeah, no, those are good points too about, even if you don't have, I don't know, if somehow you're posting a job and you're in New York right now watching this and the person's not going to physically work in New York or report to someone that works here, there are so many other, even just like city jurisdictions, state jurisdictions that have this law in place already. So honestly, you should just make it a universal practice across all your job postings at this point. And then I also think, kind of what you touched on, Claire, brings up the point of make sure you're going as low as you possibly would go when you post the range, because I think that would be potentially the worst thing to do is post a starting range of something and then hire someone internally or externally lower than what the stated range is, because that, of course, is going to always lead to that person feeling like they've been lowballed or taken advantage of or whatever it might be. And I actually had that happen with a client recently this week, and not a good look, right? And having to backtrack with that. So don't put yourself in a position where you're having to, hire higher or lower to stay within the range just because that's what you posted.
Yeah.
And thanks, Emily. That's a great anecdote too, because as we were saying earlier too, that those types of conversations and really resonate and show how your pay range can have an impact on you as an employer of, if you, whether you're putting the salary range too high or too low, people who are applying to your jobs are going to remember that.
And on that note, I do think compensation is going to cool off quite a bit. I think it became overinflated truly during COVID. I mean, that maybe is a controversial statement to make, but the labor market was not realistic at all during that time. And actually, I just saw an article come out this week that Walmart is reducing their starting pay for a big chunk of their employees across the board because they kind of raised it during a time where labor was really unavailable, and they maybe had to pay a higher starting rate to lure people away from other places. But now that there's more labor available and jobs are less, abundant, they're actually lowering. So that's unusual and doesn't usually happen, but just keep that in mind if you don't need to start, to be paying people as much as we have been from the start, which again, if you look at any numbers, was highly inflated during COVID. Make sure you make that lower anchor lower. And it's there. You don't have to pay at the lower amount, but at least it gives you that availability if stuff cools off.
Yeah. Just setting a range and being prepared for kind of future changes and things like that as well.
Yeah.
Great. Really appreciate everyone who's tuned in today and joined us live. As we start to wrap this up here, Claire and Emily, anything that kind of comes to mind that we haven't touched on yet that might be good for business leaders to know as they're starting to think about pay transparency and how that's going to impact their business?
I was going to say, just get started. So reach out to Emily with your questions. And start doing that research. Like you said, pull up job postings. You can look at ours as an example, but just get an idea of how folks are doing it. So you can kind of get your confidence and comfort level up to jump in as well.
Yeah, for sure. I would say 2 takeaways. One, minimally just make sure you're being compliant. So if you think about different, all the different laws that New York State DOL or federal have in place, this is probably something that is the most easy ever for them to audit in the history of anything, right? Because now, in theory, who knows if they're doing this, they could hire someone at the New York State DOL to just sit online all day and go through Indeed postings and flag for employers that don't have job ranges or pay ranges in the posting. So right there, you're implicating yourself in a very public way. So just make sure you're doing this and do it in good faith. And if you need to tweak it over time, that's fine. This can be your ranges can be different from posting to posting. So remember, just because you put something in one doesn't mean it's what you're held to forever.
Exactly.
And then 2, so again, trying to be maybe positive and find a little silver lining in this. If this is the first time you're kind of being forced to look at and really budget for internal pay ranges in your business, there's a lot of good things that could come from that, right? And being more creative about how to deal with wage compression or, right sizing people who may be a little bit underpaid, because sometimes that happens, right? If you don't have a structure where each year everyone's getting a pay increase on the same day or on their anniversary date, sometimes only the squeaky wheels get the oil, right? And some people fall behind. So, and plus with minimum wages going up again in 2024, it's just a good time to look at all of your comp and maybe just get a little bit ahead of the curve and be proactive about some issues that could come up with it.
Yeah. Thank you both. Yeah. And just kind of everything here emphasizes that this is going to be an ongoing conversation. Anytime there's something new with this too, clarifications come out and kind of the perception of how certain parts of a rule might change and some of the particulars, but just, really a process to be engaged with, knowing that this is a practice that employers are going to have to follow, and being able to understand the benefits of, doing the work and researching an effective range to add to your job postings. So really excited to see how this evolves, and really thankful to both of you for taking the time today to start this conversation with us. So
Yeah,
bring
thanks for the opportunity, Joe, to be on and also just to be helpful. I mean, that's what we're all about too, is just like helping terrified small business owners and employers, make sense of everything that's out there. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. Let's bring this home here. And the last question we always do on the show here. We really started this in the spirit of one of our core values called Be a Lighthouse, which is all about helping people and guiding them to the solutions they need. So I want to give you both a chance here. Emily, if you want to go first, just give a quick shout out to someone who's maybe helped you out lately or, just supported you in something this week.
Oh my gosh, you're putting me on the spot here. I did not prepare for this question. I know. So I have a friend. Are we using names and like calling out specific people?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
Johan Claren. He manages the startup incubator of RIT, and he's coaching, startup founders all the time and things. And I get to benefit from that as well. And we also have a good relationship, passing business and life tips and tricks back and forth. So yeah. Thanks, Johan, for being my lighthouse this week.
Love it. Love it. Thank you. Claire, you're up.
Yeah, I just want to give a shout out to Roscoe Nigut from the M&T Tech Academy team. So Roscoe is just an incredible lighthouse in Seneca One for M&T Tech, and got to partner with him last night to do a speaking engagement for BCAT, so the Buffalo Center for Arts and Technology. Students are going through some tech-related certifications on one of their grants, which is so exciting, and partnering with Roscoe to get them a tour and some professional development in Seneca One is just always such a joy to do. So there's just so many great partners in Seneca One we're lucky to work with. So thank you, Roscoe, this week for being a lighthouse.
Yeah, there you go. Shout out to Johan. Shout out to Roscoe. And thank you everyone who tuned in today. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Claire. Really enjoyed this conversation. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. And yeah, definitely reach out with questions. Happy to answer anything.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you back here for next week's episode, Friday at 9:30. Have a good day.
Bye.